What is narrative engineering? This will be our topic in today's episode of the Maverick Mystic Arts podcast. So any narrative is a story, and all stories are based on the bedrock of identity. So a narrative presupposes elemental imbalance and attachment to the story of self. This elemental imbalance is due to, of course, a lack of equilibrium. Now, we can work on equalizing these imbalances through direct means of interacting with the elements themselves. And once we've done this, then we open up a doorway to equanimity, a doorway to stillness. And this allows for far deeper introspection to occur. Introspection that can occur free from narrative, free from any engineered narrative, and free from the story of self. Now, in the absence of this equanimity, these imbalances open a door of introspection through the perspective of the logical fallacies. And the logical fallacies, we're only going to discuss a few of many hundreds. And they are something that my first meditation teacher encouraged me to look into. And in the beginning, these logical fallacies are a tool of the intellect to understand from a removed perspective or a secondary perspective what flaws in our elemental makeup, what aberrations from equanimity are pulling the strings as to our views, our decisions, and largely the view that we're looking at the world through. So these are essentially flaws in the spiritual growth that are detracting from equanimous potential. These logical fallacies are tools that we can start applying to ourselves, as mentioned, from a secondary intellectual perspective. Are you engaging in these yourself in your own relationship to information? And as an adept evolves, the possibility of falling prey to manipulation through these logical fallacies, whether it is internally induced or externally induced, this drastically reduces. The reason for this is because the identity resolves into clear light, and this provides a very, very profound inoculation. Through equanimity, the identity resolves into clear light, and this is a very solid way of navigating this, because then you no longer have to look at the little bits of information that are coming through and try to analyze them. You simply exist as a being from a plane, or as a being that is operating at a frequency that the fallacies are unable to corrupt and then usurp and pull into their narrative of action. So let's look at several of the logical fallacies and how we can apply them to ourselves, our own introspection and personal evolution, as well as how we can apply them to the external environment and the manipulation that comes through media and group sources all around us. So the first is an appeal to emotion, and this is typically through hope and fear. And this should be quite obvious how these will pull on the identity, because this is based on survival instinct. And anything that stimulates the survival instinct will cause the identity to want to fall in line. Okay, so hope and fear. This is obvious, say, in any advertising, right? There'll be a pull towards hope. If you use this product, you will look 30 years younger, and your hope for, say, forever love and romance will be found, it will happen. Your fear of dying alone, you won't have to worry about that if you use this super fancy, expensive lotion. So as an example, right now internally, hope and fear are very, very real. And if we take care of any of these logical fallacies internally, then we do not have to worry about them manipulating our actions and thoughts externally. So the next one would be the bandwagon. And this is, everyone's doing it, so it must be true, right? Everybody is engaging in whatever this activity is, therefore it has to be right. Everybody knows that, blah, 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 therefore it's true. Everybody knows whatever it might be. So this is a very common way to make people who have a different view feel stupid, or try to make them feel stupid, or try to make yourself feel smart. Obviously, what I think is true because everyone thinks what I think. And you might want to consider that if everybody thinks what you think, maybe there is some very big stones that have yet to be unturned. And that once those are turned, well, that's your job. Flip over those stones. Look beneath the hood of the group view. Okay, so the bandwagon effect. If your personal view on things is being swayed by everyone else's, well, how much is that your view anymore? And this has nothing to do with even, the you, and that the view that you have. This has much more to do with truth, with clarity. Is what you're thinking based on clarity? Is it coming through the lens of equanimity, or is it coming through the lens of everybody else's brain and everybody else's group cohesion? So we want to have a lot of clarity on this so that we can continue progressing on our own path, the path which dissolves the person who walks it. The next would be the straw man. This is really common. You misrepresent or fabricate or exaggerate whatever the argument that you might be facing, right? And this also includes frame size shifting. So any misrepresentation, misinterpretation, purposeful fabrication, exaggeration, and shifting what you're actually looking at. This is quite common. Now the shifting one falls into the category of red herring more, but the straw man, essentially, instead of looking at the object in front of you for all of its strengths, you seek to only acknowledge it for its weaknesses. This can be applied to interpersonal relationships. This can be applied to any argument that is swaying the identity one way or another. The fourth is ad hominem attacks. And this is a very interesting one. It means more or less attack against the man, right? Instead of against the proposition put forth or the action that's been taken, it's an appeal against the human being. So because, an example, because this person is fat, their understanding of health must be poor, right? It has nothing to do with what's been said. It has to do with an attack against the man. Because this person is mean, therefore his views on, we'll use the same one, his views on health must be wrong. Because this person, and this applies, can be in the good as well, because this person is so calm all the time, their views on spiritual development must be true. Not true at all. It has nothing to do with what's been said. It has to do with an appeal towards the person, right? Good or bad. Typically it's used in a negative way. And it's very, very common where in our own minds, we look at a person and we devalue what they have to say based on something that has absolutely nothing to do with what they are saying, right? Or with how they are acting. So a very important one to look at when we are working our own black and white mirror and our own introspection. So often we sweep things under the rug because of, how somebody might make us feel, which has nothing to do with the efficacy of what they are saying. The next one would be an appeal to authority and authority misplacement, which we've discussed previously, so we don't need to go into that one. Slippery slope would be the next one, and that is a projected future, right? This has, once again, nothing to do with, I guess we could say it's an attempted display or appeal to cause and effect. So essentially one step leads to the end, right? If you say yes to this one little thing, then that means you're saying yes to a fascist society moving in or a communist society moving in. There's no room for continued response and movement. It's okay, this one thing happened, that means 1 million steps down the road, this next thing will happen. Now, cause and effect is a very interesting thing. Projected futures are very, very interesting, and we are, you could argue, biologically wired to engage in this slippery slope fallacy from an evolutionary perspective, from a not being eaten by a lion perspective. The further back you can sequence cause and effect events or causational chains of events, the more safety you can have. If you can recognize that a certain type of rustling in the brush means not the wind, but that you're going to be eaten by a lion, well, if you can hear that, recognize the potential sequence of events that might occur and unfold and go somewhere else, then problem solved. You're no longer being eaten by a lion. So it's to our advantage from this perspective to engage in the slippery slope fallacy, the projected future fallacy. You'll find this all the time in your own psychology when it comes to especially spiritual people. It's one of the most common logical fallacies that spiritual people engage in, which is attempted prophetic vision. Not real prophetic vision, but attempted prophetic vision. So instead of looking at everything you've experienced and trying to impose that on every new thing coming up, you want to have the strength of character, the tenderness of heart, the openness of mind to continue to engage with every moment with an equanimous responsiveness, or a responsiveness that is resolving into the truth of the moment, not into the past, right? Projecting a future based on the past can be very useful, but it can also cloud the waters tremendously and prevent infinite potential that could unfold. The next one is the red herring, which we mentioned earlier, and the red herring fallacy is changing the topic. So A is irrelevant because B still exists. This would be like medicine is irrelevant because hunger still exists, or climate change, taking care of the environment is a waste of time because people are still starving. Well, it's not looking at the actual thing that's being said, it's simply completely ignoring it because of something else. And the more silly you make the alternative, the more easy this is to perceive, right? So you take a topic that you might feel strongly about and then tell yourself that it is irrelevant because you didn't wash your, I'm looking at a Listerine bottle on the table, because you didn't wash your mouth out with Listerine this morning. Some people don't use mouthwash, therefore this topic that I'm super amped up about is unimportant. That seems silly. It's the exact same thing when you're applying other important, depending on the view, topics. Okay, so easy changes of topic are a very common way of trying to dismantle what somebody is saying by not touching it at all, right? And we want to be very careful of this in our own psychology. When it comes to our own practice, we might think, oh, well, my tendency towards, and again, I'm looking at a mess on the table, so personal example, my tendency towards messiness and chaos in my environment, it doesn't matter because I spend so much time meditating. I spend so much time in internal work. You find this a lot with spiritual folks, where easy, maybe not easy, but personality or black and white mirror defects are swept under the rug because you meditate or because you have particular skill sets or city or whatever. So we want to be cognizant of when we change a topic, right? When we don't acknowledge working on an aspect of ourselves because we have some other bucket filled, to the brim with potentially positive attributes. The next one here that I've written down is hasty generalizations. And this is essentially imposing the flaws of the individual or the good things in an individual onto a group and vice versa. This we don't need to discuss too much. I think it's quite clear that generalizations are where growth and evolution go to die. Generalizations take nothing of the moment into consideration. It's just lazy. And of course, again, if we go back to our slippery slope projecting the future, then generalizations can help us save a lot of energy and save a lot of time and potentially not die. However, when it comes to the sincerity with which we explore our own soul in the course of the work, well, these generalizations, they're gonna slow us down. Okay, the next, we only have a couple more here, would be false equivalence. And this is finding bandwidths of similarity to assume global non-differentiation. So what do we mean by this? Well, because, so like an example, because both this group and this group have radicals, they're the same. They might be, they might not be. Because this cult and this cult both have some type of spiritual orientation, they're the same. They might be, they might not be. This again comes down to generalizations. Generalizations are a big one. And some of these logical fallacies, you'll find that there are overarching fallacies, that many of these logical fallacies are subsumed within. So false equivalence, again, is generalization, and you're not doing the due diligence to actually look at what is in front of you at the time. The next logical fallacy is the appeal to ignorance. So this is absence of evidence is evidence of absence. This is a very common one that we fall into, and it often pulls us into a bit of circular reasoning, where we go, this thing is true because it has to be. This other thing is false because it can't be true, which is not a very good, argument, and not very solid thinking that's occurring. So absence of evidence. A common one in the internal arts worlds, especially with folks who are exploring Tai Chi and Qigong from the perspective of more of a martial standpoint or a Taoist body, like the beginnings of the training, a body-based training, embodiment type stuff would be, well, I've never experienced this type of energetic phenomena, therefore, right, absence of evidence, therefore, it isn't real, evidence of absence, right? this is something that holds many, many, many people from taking the next step on their spiritual journey, because we tend to work within our experience, and this makes a lot of sense. Why would we assume that something is true simply because somebody else says it is? However, the inability to embrace the unknown, to be comfortable in the space of a question mark, this will always hold back our growth. If we can engage with someone who, say, might claim to be teaching stuff that, based off our experience up to this point, is nonsense, it doesn't make any sense, right? It's nonsensical. If we can still engage with that training, maybe we'll find that the growth continues, and that the thing that we thought was nonsense actually has a lot of merit. Then the absence of evidence is not dissuading us from further growth. And the evidence of absence isn't a self-fulfilling prophecy based on our current perceptions and experience. So a very common one, and something that holds a lot of people back. And typically, if this falls into the category often of spiritual materialism, where what you value as proof of concepts of one's attainment on the spiritual path, that will very often determine how you deal with this. If your proof of concept of attainment is your skill in, say, Tai Chi push hands, that's got almost nothing to do with spiritual attainment. It is a skill that can be learned with very little spiritual evolution. Can spiritual evolution play a role? Absolutely. Can it enhance it? Absolutely. However, if your proof of concept of attainment is push hands, well, that might be closing some doors for you. It might be forcing your perceptions to continue to exist within certain realms of density and inhibiting the evolution into perception of far more refined aspects of reality and far more refined recognition and unification with higher aspects of the vibrational scale. Okay, the last one here is false dilemma. So this is two extremes. You're either this or you're that. You're with us, you're against us. Any time where there's only two extremes in your mind, there isn't nuance. You are not, and this again is not necessarily needing to be an intellectual game that you play with yourself, but simply, if there are only two potentials, it's very likely that you're not looking at it from the place of equanimity. If likely your identity is lodged into one of the extremes. So if you are in your mind perceiving two extremes, one of which is right, one of which is only wrong, one of which is only right, it's very likely that the one that you agree with is the one that is only right. So we want to be wary of this, of course, in our own minds, in our own creations, as well as when it comes from the environment. Now, all of the logical fallacies, the 10 or so, 11 that we discussed here, as well as the rest of them, fall under the category of identification with phenomena. And this leads to attachment to relative truth. And attachment to relative truth is where, very intellectual people, mercurial type folks, love to dance with the mind and rationalize, and the rationalizing mind lives in relative truth. Now, non-confrontational people will say things like, the truth lies somewhere in the middle of the poles. And this is a dilemma that we want to be very wary of. The mentality is subject to subversion of true harmony due to the moving of the poles. So if the truth lies to you somewhere in the middle of the relative speaking that people are engaging in culture and community, if the truth lies somewhere between the two poles, it's here. But if you move the poles, now it's here. So the truth is purely relative based off the culture or the environment that you're in, which isn't really much truth at all. And this is a very easy way of shifting the non-confrontational or the middle of the pack type of mentality towards one extreme or another. And this is done by shifting the poles, by shifting the extremes. And over time, you adjust to the new normal. And now your narrative has changed to support that new normal, that new middle ground, which is simply based on a new dichotomy of extremes. So the training that we can engage in that helps with this, you'll notice all the basic training is what we're working with in terms of the evolution of the black and white mirror, and through that our realization of different degrees of equanimity, and this allows us the beginnings of our spiritual sovereignty. So basics of mental training, thought concentration, watching the thoughts arise and fall away, and of course, basic vacancy of mind, which comes from thought concentration and from watching the thoughts. These offer an opportunity for freedom and clarity to begin to arise. We're not being surprised by our thoughts and then thinking that they're ours. We're simply aware of the process. And we can look with interest at the streams of thought that are rolling through rather than attachment. And we also have the capacity to cut the thoughts off through our concentration training on one object to help us take get a little bit of a break, from the whatever habits are, running around in circles in our head. Cultivation of the elements and your black and white mirror, obviously, and transmutation of the elements, very important, so that you can acknowledge how unresolved aspects of your black and white mirror and imbalances in the elements are aiding these logical fallacies in taking hold of your view. So very important that we work with the elements, the black and white mirror, and transmutation of the elements so that we can course correct these imbalances and continue forward from a place of magical equilibrium and equanimity. And of course, magical equilibrium and equanimity training, harmonizing the elements, is wonderful training for this whole process. When the elements are in harmony and the identity is no longer impeding the free flow of the elements, then we have the movement of the elements, which allows for magical equilibrium to be not a static thing, but a dynamic, active, and live thing. And this live dynamism of equanimity it's kind of like the first real breakthrough that people are going to have when it comes to an equanimity that is less easily corruptible. So you could talk about this for ages, how useful equanimity is, and we want to make sure that we're training it in such a way that we aren't minimizing the need for external conditions that allow for equanimity to unfold and to expose itself in our reality. That said, if we try to work under extremes of resistance that are well beyond our level of skill, we're not really going to be working with equanimity so much as simple stress inoculation due to exposure, which again can have some value, but it's not really the same as equanimity. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And for those of you interested in training, please check out the website. You can become a member there and look at the courses in Tai Chi and Qigong, Hermetic Alchemy, and meditation. There is also access to the Zen Den that you get as a member on the website. And this is where I answer any questions via video. It's an increasingly growing library of video answers for student questions that come in. So you can take advantage of that when you become a member on the website. I also teach retreats and workshops. Once again, check the website and take a look at upcoming retreats that you might be interested in. And if you have any interest in organizing a retreat in your own space or country where you live, get in touch and we can look into how we might go about organizing that. All right, thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for your time. And as always, have fun, practice. Bye.